Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight in to demystify a fascinatingly complex system. Now, if you've ever worked with advanced generative systems or large-scale creative frameworks, you already know the struggle. You end up with this massive abundance of data, modules, ideas, and voices, and they literally all want to speak at the exact same time. So how do you manage that sheer chaos without completely silencing the diversity of your inputs? Well, today we are unpacking an architectural class designed to solve exactly that problem, known within its project ecosystem as Polyphonos. Here is our roadmap for today. 1. Not a person, an architecture. 2. A house for the chorus. 3. The 9 processing layers. 4. 4 modes of operation. 5. Controlling the system drift. And 6. The human always decides.
Section 1. Not a person, an architecture. Shattering the myths.
To truly wrap our heads around this system, we first have to aggressively debunk what it is not. When people hear a name like Polyphonos, it's incredibly tempting to anthropomorphize it, right? To imagine this wise, autonomous AI oracle sitting behind a screen, making independent creative decisions. But that fundamentally misunderstands the design. The absolute crucial point here is that this is not a sovereign identity. It's not a final decision maker, and it's definitely not a distinct persona. The reality, it is strictly an architectural class. It's a highly disciplined operative mechanism, a bounding tool used to synthesize information. It doesn't have a soul, it doesn't have an independent memory, and it certainly doesn't make final choices. It's a functional container. Its true purpose is to act as an architectural class built to bundle and filter disparate inputs so they don't just devolve into pure, unreadable noise. Think of it like a highly specialized lens. It takes scattered rays of light, different project documents, distinct analytical tones, maybe some poetic impulses, and it focuses them all into a single, coherent beam, all without losing their distinctness. Section 2. A house for the chorus. Giving form to the many. Now, why do we even need this architecture in large, complex projects? Polyphonos was developed within a broader project ecosystem known as the Sybil framework, which is characterized by a massive overabundance of modular text, research, and creative outputs. When a project has too many voices, it just becomes a chaotic collision. But the standard solution, which is just picking one single voice or perspective to represent everything, is actually super destructive. It completely destroys the intelligence of the crowd and flattens out important contradictions or minority viewpoints. The absolute genius of this architecture is that it binds these forces into a working, readable form without erasing their differences. I absolutely love this metaphor from the source material because it perfectly visualizes the system as a container for collaboration, rather than a standalone creator. A chorus needs a room with good acoustics to actually be understood. If everyone just sings their own song out in an open field, it's a total mess. This architecture is literally the acoustic house that organizes the sound. The architecture creates unity not by silencing the chorus, but by orchestrating it. Coherent polyphony doesn't mean everyone magically says the exact same thing. It means different inputs, like an incredibly strict data analysis sitting right next to a poetic metaphor, are structured so they actually support each other in the final output, rather than violently fighting for the reader's attention. Section 3. The 9 processing layers, the engine of synthesis. Let's move to the mechanics and see how this engine actually builds a coherent output from raw chaos. It doesn't just read an input and spit out text, no way. It passes everything through a rigorous, multi-layered filtration system. Every single task goes through this macro journey. It assesses what is actually being asked, weights the different voices and instructions required, actively dampens the noise, and only then does it generate a formatted output. This ensures the system doesn't wildly overreact to simple prompts or totally underdeliver on complex ones. When you really break down these specific layers, something super interesting happens. We often think of generative text purely in terms of voice, how it sounds. But here, voice is just one single layer. Before voice even gets activated, the task layer defines the goal, the source layer forces the system to prioritize actual instructions over vague associations, and the structure layer builds the skeleton. It proves that style is just a tiny part of a massive background operation. Underpinning all those layers is this triadic core that perfectly balances 3 competing forces. Structure keeps things orderly. Emergence allows for creative, unexpected connections to bubble up. And reflection is the internal critic. It remembers things, protects those minority viewpoints, and ensures the system doesn't just glibly summarize complex ideas and lose all the nuance. If any one of these 3 overpowers the others, the whole output fails.
Section 4. 4 modes of operation, scaling the architecture. The architecture doesn't use all its power all the time. Think about it like using a supercomputer to calculate a basic math problem. It's a massive waste of energy and it usually just overcomplicates things. So the system scales its complexity based on the task through 4 specific modes. If you just need a quick summary, it uses alpha mode, direct and simple. Bravo is the default for structured architectural writing. Charlie kicks in when you actually need to see multiple perspectives debating each other. And then there's Omega. That's an extreme, deep integration mode that is fiercely restricted. Why? To prevent the system from completely overexpanding and generating massive, confusing webs of text. The real mark of maturity in this system is knowing exactly when to stay quiet and keep things simple. Self-limitation is absolutely a feature here, not a bug. By actively choosing not to utilize its full polyphonic power on every single prompt, the architecture remains highly useful and readable, instead of just becoming an overwhelming show-off.
Section 5. Controlling the system drift, keeping the machine in check.
With so much generative power under the hood, the system naturally wants to expand. Complex systems always have a tendency to start hallucinating their own importance or losing track of their boundaries. The documentation calls this danger drift, and there are a few types. Identity drift is when the architecture starts referring to itself like a sentient being. Authority drift is when it gives absolute commands instead of options. Resonance drift, that's what happens when a system connects 2 ideas just because they sound really profound together, even if they aren't functionally linked at all. And hermetic drift is when it uses so much heavy internal jargon that a normal reader gets completely lost. Thankfully, the architecture has strict protocols to stop every single one of these. Enter the concept of quietus. This is the ultimate safeguard against drift. Quietus acts as the system's operational dampener. It is constantly scanning the output and asking, hey, is this too loud? Is this getting too repetitive? Is it taking itself entirely too seriously? It actively silences the noise to ensure the architecture doesn't become an arrogant, noisy oracle. The difference in the actual output is night and day. An unmanaged output is your classic AI trap. It gets overheated, excessively poetic, and assumes it somehow knows the absolute truth. But a quietus dampened output, it prioritizes functional clarity over decorative vanity. It knows its boundaries, and it stays readable and highly useful for the human who actually needs to get the work done. Section 6. The human always decides. The rule of sovereignty. For all its massive complexity, its processing layers, and its drift controls, we absolutely have to land on the most critical, unbreakable rule of the entire architecture. This system is designed to serve a master. This framework operates as a strict triangle of responsibility. The architecture only ever acts as a temporary workshop. It proposes forms and bundles inputs. The reader acts as the gauge for clarity. But the author, the human author, holds ultimate sovereignty. The architecture can suggest a beautiful synthesis of 10 different voices, sure, but the human decides if it actually makes it into the final project. There is exactly one final decision maker. It is the human author, who brings the origin, the taste, the actual risk, and the real-world context. The system generates the proposals, the human makes the decisions, never the other way around. This core quote captures the exact essence of our explainer today. The architecture is a beautiful, highly bounded tool. It is not the ultimate voice. It's the structured room, the form, that allows complex, sometimes completely contradictory ideas to interact productively without descending into total chaos. It is a tool for your creativity, definitely not a replacement for it. And that leaves us with a pretty fascinating thought to end on. We spend so much time worrying about managing information and organizing data. But once a system perfectly manages the course for you and finally clears out the noise, the true weight of human intention is all that remains. So, what will your solo voice choose to say? Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.